Welcome to Men Making a Difference, PGSAO men who inspire and motivate.
Good morning, Branden Ly. How are you?
Good morning, Madam State's Attorney. I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Busy, but I'm doing good. And I'm sure you're busy too. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what you do in this office?
Yeah, so I work as a prosecutor in the district court unit. So the district court unit handles a good number of the cases that come through the state's attorney's office. And those are almost entirely misdemeanor cases. And so it's a really great training ground to cut your teeth as a prosecutor, to learn how to try cases. And I think there's a real connection with the community because a lot of the cases that we handle affect the lives of all of the citizens in Prince George's County. So it's very fast paced. The judges, they want to see cases move through. And so you really have to be good on your feet. You have to be very well prepared. You just have to know how to multitask because there's a lot of different things going on in a different day. But it really sharpens your skills and makes you become a better prosecutor.
Absolutely. And in addition to getting that trial experience, you also get experience learning how to use your discretion, correct?
Absolutely. Because, I think when you're a prosecutor, you can't just approach a case as, okay, here's a statute, a certain law, and I'm trying to prosecute someone for breaking the law. You also have to figure out, is it worth going forward on a case, or is there a way to resolve a case that doesn't involve asking for jail time, or that can help rehabilitate a defendant or give them an opportunity, to hopefully enact some changes in their lives so that they become productive and better citizens. So I think, in using your prosecutorial discretion to really better the lives of the citizens of Prince George's County, that's a really important part of serving as a prosecutor.
Yeah, and it's an interesting time because, we're going through this period of reform, racial reconciliation, just changes that the community is really requesting, not just in policing, but in the entire justice system. So as you think about your role as a minister of justice, someone who has an awful lot of discretion and arguably very, very powerful player in this whole system. What do you see as, our role, or how do you think we could even more effectively use our role in order to advance this cause of reform and, making this system fairer for everyone?
Yeah, and that's definitely a very important question, and it's I guess challenging to think about because there are a lot of pressures that are brought on, and I think they're positive because we want this to have a justice system that is more fair and more just. And I think a lot of that comes down to, sometimes I would speak to friends of mine who are current or former defense attorneys, or even someone who's a current a public defender who's a friend of mine. And one of the things he would always tell me is you have to look at every person as an individual, not just say, okay, this person was charged with a certain kind of crime. Let me find out, what the maximum penalty is. Looking at each individual and trying to figure out, what, okay, yes, like I could prove a certain case, but also, are there other things going on in their life that may be, putting pressure on them and maybe causing them to engage in a certain type of misconduct? Is there, when I'm preparing a case, am I making sure that I'm fulfilling my obligations as a prosecutor to turn over all evidence that is exculpatory, that could help defendant prepare his or her case, and that, all of my interactions with defense counsel or with defendants, I'm being as fair and as transparent as possible. Because I think, there's, one of the criticisms I think of prosecutors in the past has been that they're hiding the ball. They're not turning over evidence that could help a defendant, prepare their case. So I think in this day and age, there's more scrutiny of the actions of prosecutors and officers, and I think it's actually a really good opportunity to sort of elevate or role as ministers of justice and to hold ourselves up to the highest standards possible in making sure that we're trying to protect the community, but that we're also doing justice and that we're respecting the rights of people who are being charged in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a tough role, especially since we also, want to ensure that our victims' rights are protected and that we seek as best we can to obtain and deliver justice to them. Sometimes because of circumstances surrounding the arrest or perhaps even the interrogation of a suspect, we find that, maybe their rights weren't protected. And so we can't move forward on those cases or we can't use certain evidence. But we still have a duty and responsibility to our victims too, to try to make them as whole as possible and try to, achieve justice for them. Sometimes we can't, but oftentimes we can. And, so why don't you talk a little bit about how you interact with victims of crime and, kind of what do you say to them when they ask, are we going to get them? Is this going to be a guilty? Like, how do you manage expectations while still letting them know that you are there to protect really justice generally, but as the victim, we want to seek justice for them. How do you interface with our victims?
Yeah, that's also another great question, because I think that is definitely one of the big challenges in our position is that you want to work with the victims and you want to make sure that they feel heard and that they're involved in the process. But you're again protecting everyone's rights, including the defendant's rights. So I think the biggest thing with victims, and my supervisor, Stacey Ann Llewellyn, always talks about this, that oftentimes the biggest the thing that the victim really wants as much as anything else is to be heard. Because they've gone through something that's traumatic, that's a difficult situation. And so sometimes they just want to sort of give you their side of the story and all the parts of it they felt where they weren't treated fairly, or they thought they were wronged, or whatever it is. So I think a big part of it is just is listening and not. I think one of the things that one of my coworkers has said is, when you're listening to someone, you're not listening to respond, you're listening to actually listen, and that's something that, is challenging, because I think a lot of times lawyers, we want to, point across or say something, but especially with the victims, you owe it to them to hear their story, and to understand where they're coming from. And I also think a lot of it comes down to education and saying, this is kind of what the situation is. We have this case, and these are the facts, and this is the law, and this is how the situation might end up, or we think this is how it should end up, based on all the different factors. And I think as long as most of the victims, I think as long as you explain that and give them the big picture, then even if they don't get the result that they want, then at least they're going to respect the job that you're doing. Because I think the thing that I would say is the biggest issue with, or the reason maybe why a victim might be unhappy with how a prosecutor handled a case is if they didn't hear anything, or they never got contacted, or something like that. I think most victims, once you sort of help them understand what's going on, all the different moving parts, then they can say, okay, I may have disagreed with your decision, but I understand why you did what you did. And I understand that, you put in a lot of work into this case, and it wasn't something where you just didn't care about the case. It's something that you were invested in, and you did everything you could to achieve the right outcome. So I think that's really important, is the conversation that you're having with the victim, and just listening again, because again, that's something that is really important, for these victims, because sometimes they feel that no one is listening to them, and just even having that conversation where you're just letting them talk, as long as they want to. I think that's really important in terms of building trust with your victims.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate having someone like you in the office who really gets that part of it, and really gets the bigger picture, and sometimes having to explain, why a case can't move forward. But as long as you're doing it in a way that is compassionate, that's thoughtful, where the victim is respected, it it's not always what they want to hear, but they understand that we fought as hard as we could for them. And then when we are able to move forward, which is a lot of the times, we are able to move forward, if we're able to achieve, the only type of justice we can. We can't always make everyone whole. So I think sometimes we pursue justice, and sometimes all we can achieve is accountability, holding that person accountable for their actions. And but I know that the community and our victims feel good about that. They feel good about the fact that we fought hard for them, and that we took their case seriously, and that we heard them, and that we did our best to achieve justice as best we can. So I look forward to seeing you continue to grow in the office and move through the different units. And I think with the attitude that you have, you're going to be very successful here. And more importantly, our community, I think, is going to continue to grow their confidence and trust in our office. So thank you so much for the work you're doing, and continued success here at the office.
Well, thank you very much, Madam State's Attorney. I mean, it's a privilege to work in this office, and it's not something that I or any of my coworkers take for granted, because I think it's such a special opportunity, and it's having the ability to positively impact the community is a great privilege. So it's something that I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to do on a daily basis.
Awesome. Thanks, Branden.
You're welcome. Have a great day.